Welcome. It's great to be here. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor and VP of StreamingMedia.com and Streaming Media Magazine. Someone's signaling me. No, they're not. We've been covering the online video industry at Streaming Media for 20 years. And needless to say, the changes have been seismic, and none more so than just in the last few years. And so we've got a great group of panelists today to talk about those changes and talk about what's happening in the world of live streaming and OTT. The name of the panel is Watch and Spend. We really have representatives here from just about every part of the ecosystem. And hopefully we'll be able to give you some insights into what's going on, what you should be looking for in the future as the OTT market continues to grow. At the moment, the latest statistics I saw about 130 million households or more already subscribed to OTT services. That's expected to go up to 208 million by 2023. So we're just really in the midst of this huge growth curve. And the people on this panel are in the segments that are driving that growth. And we're going to talk about technology trends, business model trends, the ever-elusive monetization challenge that we're all interested in. And before we dive in, I'd just like to ask each of my panelists to introduce themselves briefly. So let's start with you, Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Dapp. I work for Google. I focus on all things local as it relates to Google. I've also worked at HBO and CBS, and so I've had the privilege of sitting on the launch teams of HBO Go, YouTube TV, and CBS All Access.
Hi, Sean Merriam. I'm presently a consultant, but I come from the user background. I'm a video editor, motion graphics designer, and based on some of my experiences, not only as an avid ACSR 25 years ago, I learned the technical side, and as a result, work in workflow consulting and designing systems for decently sized companies.
Hi, I'm Mark Donnigan. I'm with a company by the name of Beamer. We're a video technology software company, and what we focus on is delivering very high quality video, encoding specifically at low bit rates. So throughout the panel, we'll probably hear a lot of discussion around video consumption is going up. And yes, networks are getting faster, and yet there's always this squeeze of delivering quality and meeting the consumer expectation, and that's what our company focuses on.
Good afternoon, everyone. John Landman. I'm from a company called Teradek. We are a hardware manufacturer of very small and small encoder devices that have seen a growth and birth due to the explosion of OTT and live streaming over the last 10 years.
Hi, I'm Eric Bolton. I head up business development for Zixi. Zixi is a software platform that allows broadcast quality video to run over managed and unmanaged IP, aka the open internet. And we've been helping OTT services across the board, from Bloomberg and Turner and HBO, Viacom, et cetera. And basically, we touch every end of the acquisition to the delivery, just short of the consumer edge, and have been very interested to watch as the entire television industry adopts a software-defined, cloud-based set of infrastructures, and what that means in terms of the ability to provide programming, reduce costs, increase efficiency, et cetera.
Hi, my name is Hank Fraycon. I'm the CEO of Source Digital. We're a next-generation advanced advertising and commerce platform that's designed specifically for video content. So I really love the title Watch and Spend, because that's exactly what we do. We take micro-elements of data that are contained within every piece of content, whether it's live or OTT or mobile or web, and allow you to actually create attribution. So if you wanted to sell something, bookmark a location, know what's going on, and through all those analytics, you get a deeper understanding of your viewer, your consumer.
All right, well, let's start with sort of the big picture. Rebecca, as you said, you've been in this industry a long time. I think all of us have. What are the biggest changes that you've seen in the streaming and OTT industry since the time you began to bring us where we are today?
Yeah, so I think that from a technology perspective, we've been there for a very long time. Technology has well preceded the business side of the house. And over the past, I think, a few years especially, the business side has really caught up. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to figure out how to create standards that are going to they're going to make all of these things work from a business perspective. And so it's a really interesting time because we're not figuring out how to solve the problem. We're not building the engineering piece. We're actually trying to negotiate with one another to figure out what the standards are going to be and how we're actually going to execute on what the plans are.
Okay, Sean?
Well, for me, I think the big change has been the way that live streaming has been important components for certain elements. I come from esports and a sports background. It was recently that I was working for Blizzard and MLG, and their main, foundation of their business is built on live streaming and the ability for users to share little components out of those streams. So that's a big deal for them.
Right, right. I'm not going to do this for every question, but let's get a brief insight from each of you on down the line. Yeah, so Mark.
Yeah, so what I've seen is I was privileged to be a part of a very early transactional VOD service by the name of Voodoo. And some of you may know that or have used the content, watched the content. And everything was so siloed. So deals were, there was a different deal that you had to strike for digital distribution. And Rebecca, your head is nodding. Yes, you know very well from the TV side. One of the most fundamental changes is that now all these deals are kind of baked in from the very beginning. So now content availability is just that much more readily available across all the different platforms. And that's a very good thing, and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, this is really going to age me. It wasn't long ago. 10 years ago, I remember selling or working with a company called Tamberg and selling their first H.264 encoder for $59,000.
Yeah.
Today I can.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. Today I can deliver one, for $600 or less, and that is to do a better quality than what we did 10 years ago. And where we've seen that go is to launch the e-gaming industry and enable someone to take a feed and go live with it, or go to an OTT platform. I think the convergence of these two things has allowed this industry to grow. I don't think there'd be much business if everyone was paying $59K for an encoder.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly from our perspective, and we only do live and live streaming video, it's been interesting to watch the historical migration. So you've got $75 billion in North American broadcast advertising spend. Nobody wants to lose that. You're trying to manage your traditional MSO business, but your entire audience, 30 years and under 35, is no longer there and has migrated. And you watched initially services, Netflix pioneering, et cetera, Amazon Prime, client of ours, go to a file-based, and yet you need to control and maintain attention. You need to monetize it the right way. You need to maintain all the broadcast attributes. And in addition to that, you are going to bring basically the live linear programming into this OTT world. So if live television broadcast was very complex and it required dedicated and closed systems, OTT supply chains are even more complex. And there are more partners. There's more people within the supply chain. We're watching these very large businesses that you can see them react to that. You've got Disney with Fox. You've got all the Warner Media under AT&T. Rumors of Viacom and CBS. But in general, everyone's going to need to consolidate to allow their programming to hit this universal and highly mobile audience.
I just think there's a lot of really cool stuff coming. If you look at where we were and now where we're coming to, much like people give snowboarding credit for saving the ski industry, I think esports is going to get the credit years from now for saving the TV and also social, because the next generation of viewers, all of us on this stage are very comfortable with a lean back experience, right? But I think the next generation of viewers, as they keep coming along, they're going to get used to that comfort zone that they get out of esports, and they're going to want to see that take shape in and around live streaming and OTT environments. And the medium's perfectly set up for it. So.
Right, right. And from our perspective at Streaming Media, and in the discussion we had before the panel today, for as much as changed and evolved, we're still trying to solve some of the same problems we were trying to solve 20 years ago, right? How do we make money off of this? How do we allow people to use digital content to drive other sorts of purchases? So there's certainly been evolution and progress. and hopefully we're finally close to cracking the code on some of those things. Real quick, I'm going to ask if I don't know if the tech team can turn up the monitors here on stage a little bit. I don't know if anyone else is having a little trouble hearing each other. But, you know, coming from inside the OTT industry, the streaming industry, as we do at Streaming Media, we hear a lot of hype about OTT versus broadcast, sort of these things pitted against each other, which I think is sort of a false dichotomy. I mean, broadcast and pay TV, they're not going away, right? At least not anytime soon. But are there things that OTT can do better than broadcast or pay TV? And what are some of the things that are challenges, or what are some of the challenges for the OTT industry to get there? Mark, you had some insights into that earlier.
Yeah, sure. So what I think what's happening to the consumer, and there's been, you know, even just in the last couple of weeks, certainly a month or two, you know, a lot written about this, is that there is some fatigue that is coming from having to manage, you know, all these multiple subscriptions, right? But there's something that's very interesting is that the one advantage that an OTT platform has that, you know, maybe your traditional pay TV package has is that they're, you know, pay TV, they can only make so many deals, they can only even technically distribute so many channels, and so they're sort of limited in their aggregation ability. OTT, they can aggregate a lot more channels and just a lot more content, almost an unlimited amount, right? But that then creates this whole problem of fatigue, especially if it's a subscription monetization model. So when we think about sort of the convergence, or, you know, is there a winner or a loser? And I'm really happy you didn't present it that way, because a lot of times, you know, this discussion is kind of, who's going to win, who's going to lose in this? Everybody's going to win, because at the end of the day, the consumer is going to, in some cases, you know, choose based on price. It might be purely economics. It might be device, you know, where they can get their content. They're going to have, you know, we're all different. We all have different needs for even the type of content that we want. Technically, it's all converging onto an IP platform. So some of the traditional walls of broadcast and OTT, yes, there are definitely some technical differences. Those will persist for some time, but eventually, and the eventually is not in the far future, it's going to converge onto a single distribution topology.
I still think we need to be clear on what the differences between OTT and live streaming is, or VOD is. You know, most of the OTT stuff is all done in the cloud, right? It's from a cloud server, so that's why it's expandable, whereas, you know, the more traditional come from a video server that's pushing over ATSC or you know, over satellite. So I guess their bandwidth is confined, which is why they can only push X many number of videos at one time.
Well, John, in our discussion before the panel, you sort of broke it down as the quality providers versus the quantity providers.
That was when we were discussing whether, you know, what is the difference between an OTT platform and Facebook or YouTube, right? Because they're both consumable on a tablet, right? And we talked about Facebook and YouTube being the quantity play, and the OTT platform being more of the quality play, and pushing the boundaries of 4K, you know, HDR content. I haven't yet seen Facebook supporting that. I haven't yet seen Facebook or YouTube supporting the newer protocols that are coming out, the newer encoding algorithms that are coming out. So, you know, we're in an interesting time, and you know, I often wonder what would happen if Facebook decides to get into the OTT world. You know, Apple is now, you know, getting into the OTT world, right? So, you know, I think from an Avid perspective, it's great because it's driving a lot more high-quality content, which is where you guys play, you know, down the pipe, and that's really encouraging for all of us.
What are some of the other roadblocks that you all see in terms of OTT as it exists now, getting to the point where it really is on par with broadcast? Is quality one of them? Service?
So, you know, I actually want to build on some of the things that have been said, which I agree with. you know, what we're talking about is a lot of OTT players that are also actually traditional broadcasters as well, right?
'Cause they knew they had to get in the game.
It's not mutually exclusive necessarily. And the challenge is a lot of the really quality content is tethered to legacy rights deals. That's right. And so some of the challenges that we're having to figure out are really from a are purely business perspective. And we're building technologies to support the rights challenges and to you know, sort of figure it out. And the way I see it is you have big tech companies like the ones that have been mentioned, right? We'll call them the Silicon Valley players. And you have some of the traditional MVPD players. The traditional MVPD players are running as fast as they can to get to the other side, right? The Silicon Valley players are running as fast as they can to get to the other side. And there aren't truly any players who do both really, really well. And I believe one of the big winners will be whoever can empathize with the other side and not sort of look at them as Silicon Valley players looking at traditional saying, ugh, they're just broadcast, we're going to do it our way. And then they don't get any of the good content because they don't figure out the business, right? And the traditional side, they're going to have to figure out the technology side of the house. I don't know if that resonates.
I mean, I'd say that there's another roadblock apart from you know, rights management and deals being made, is that there is not a Nielsen-type system that can say, or can follow me watching, you know, something on my iPad that then I move to my phone and then I move to my TV. You know, there's not an integrated system that can give a rating to all of those platforms.
The challenge with that, though, is there are systems, but no one has agreed on a standard like everyone agreed on a standard with Nielsen. And so it's not that the technology isn't there, it's that we as an industry have to figure that piece out because Nielsen, 80, 90 years was the standard, and everyone agreed that Nielsen was the standard. We either need to all agree that there's a standard or from a monetization perspective figure out how to use these different metrics to provide the same kind of monetization.
I think we can blame it on Amazon because they're not on the panel.
Right.
Well, I mean, no one wants to say this underpins. I mean, you've got 75 billion global, 75 billion North America, 250 billion global in broadcast ad dollars. You're getting to about 30 billion on the digital side. But the Nielsen rating, 18 to 54 years old is your demographic, 18 to 34 you're coveted. There's a zero in that 18 to 34 that you're trying to make up with a comm score and a piece. And so I think you started it with like, is there more expected out of OTT versus broadcast? And I think that you can change the dynamic. People fought over rights because you had to hold an audience hostage to basically monetize that at its top level. And now that audience is everywhere. It's in a car, to your point, catching it in all its different viewpoints. The idea that I can now take, like we're doing for Indie, you can take 5 and 6 different camera things. You can more engage into your sport or whatever it is you're trying to tie. And you're trying to hold somebody's attention where any audience member 30 and under doesn't wait for Thursday at 8 o'clock. It doesn't even necessarily watch a live sporting event unless it relates to their fantasy players. So taking all of these things in conjunction while not taking a $250 billion market and driving it to 100, that's a super important piece. And you can now create all of this much richer. And while Silicon Valley is very good at scale and running, you still have to be good at making content, producing this, and owning all those rights. And so I think you're seeing it's interesting to watch, just from my one view. We used to take people and have clients visit other clients and see their operations and their plants and broadcast. All of a sudden, the OTT and digital streaming services are weaponizing. There's an arms race. Every single major player has announced a major streaming service. Apple, which announced it, was so vague in what it's going to do, which normally it's completely specific. It just tells you there's an awful lot of money on the table, and the consumer.
It tells you they haven't done the deals yet.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Right. The title of the panel is Live Streaming in OTT, and I want to spend a little time talking about the particular challenges and opportunity on the live streaming front. And a number of you on the panel work in live streaming every day. What do you think the biggest challenges are for live streaming right now? Again, via IP to sort of achieve what broadcast and pay TV have been able to achieve? Or maybe that's not even the goal. What can the live streaming over IP do that traditional can't?
Well, one thing I have a narrow window here because of the esports connection, particularly for this. But one of the most valuable things that they did was that they had the audience engagement in those technologies, and they would feed back, and then half the people would watch the stream to see the chat, to see what was being said, to see. So
Interactivity.
yeah.
Yeah, IP offers that, right? So
Well, it creates like a twitch. Like a twitch is a hard thing for all of us at our age to be watching, but you've got 80,000 concurrent live channels, and 40 to 50,000 of those are to audiences of 10 or less.
look,
And the length of viewership for some of those esports, 8 hours for over.
Well, I think the numbers are, I think this year it was 300, or last year it was 380 million viewers. I think it's sat just behind the NFL. And then I think by in the next 2 years, it's going to go to 660 million viewers. And I think, again, it's that for live, and we've been talking to a lot of the live sports broadcasters, and they're all following suit. I mean, they already have investments in esports, but at the same time, they're revamping their, their platforms to support more immersive frameworks and use the stats scores to drive different experiences. I mean, Amazon did a little tiptoe into this this year with you could on their Thursday night game, you could actually click off of the stat score and it would take you to a commerce experience if you liked the play that happened and stuff like that. So, I think that like I go back to that saying in the beginning, for live sports, it's esports that's going to push the envelope.
Yeah. I mean, just putting some numbers to that, I calculated everyone up, all the encoders that we've sold over the last 10 years, and it's over 100,000 units. We had one particular company that bought 3,500 units just for that company. So you've got 3,500 of their locations now going live. These numbers are growing each year. And to be honest, you asked what the question is of live streaming. It's always connectivity, right? That is the Achilles heel of what we try and do. We're a broadcaster, their pipes are 99.99% up. So that's the challenge that we have, and with the helps of Google and the other connectivity or the other partners or the other cloud providers, we've seen an amazing increase in reliability of getting feeds into the cloud with technologies such as Zigbee and the like.
I think to that point, it kind of raises a second part, because broadcast was always this super defined, you didn't know until it got to the end, net return kind of feed, and now you can view and see the data, but we're really talking about this, not quality of service, but quality of experience, and kind of defining that. And I know that Netflix has put out its WAMF standard, and we, the industry, are looking to try to put quality scoring across that, because there are so many pieces, and this whole panel is representative of all those parts of that chain. And I think that the biggest challenge of live is keeping it up. Your picture that you look at on your iPad is much, much better than anything that we grew up with on television. And that's just an expectation. And we're already talking 8K, and we're talking the next gen. So we're going to test the internet. But I think that the pieces are there. You're watching the cloud continuously grow, and the players get within that. And it gives a completely different level of infrastructure available to any content and broadcaster that we didn't have just even 5 years ago.
I go to a lot of different speaking engagements, and some of these are specifically with broadcasters. And the funny thing is, they're still talking about whether or not they should or feel safe about putting their content in the cloud. This is still an argument.
Right.
And I always sit there and I shake my head and I go, oh my God, if Facebook or Google or AWS decided to launch a TV station, what would it look like today? And this, I think, is what is holding back the broadcasters. They have to start thinking, what would they do if they were Google, or if they, how would they launch a TV station? It's got to change. Things have got to change.
Well, and it sounds like, when I posed that question about what the biggest challenge is, I was really expecting because it's what I typically get for an answer, that the quality of service, quality of experience, but particularly the picture quality, the quality of what's going on in that rectangle is where OTT is still struggling to compete against broadcast and pay TV. But what I'm hearing everyone here say is that to focus exclusively on that is to kind of miss the point because of all of these other experiences that OTT can offer that broadcast and pay TV simply can't.
I'll give you a perfect, just an hour ago I was talking to my son and he says he's got that new Galaxy phone. He's watching 4K HDR content on his phone.
And it looks awesome.
And it looks awesome. And I'm like,
great.
I can't do it.
Right.
There's no broadcaster in the country that can do that. And if they did, oh my gosh, can you imagine the infrastructure that would have to be changed?
So now it's my chance to talk about quality because one thing that's very interesting is if you want to watch 4K, you've got a really nice 4K experience. Yes, there's a few channels on DirecTV. Yes, there's a few channels on pretty much all the MVPD platforms. But most of the time, it's SDR that's been basically upscaled and processed. It's not native. And so where do you go? The only place you can go is Netflix, Amazon, and there's a handful of other platforms, but basically Netflix and Amazon, and that's pure 100% OTT streaming. And provided that you've got sufficient internet bandwidth, and it really doesn't have to be crazy. Nowadays, 50 megabits is, I think, even the most basic home package. And provided your router is set up, and there's some basic caveats, but for most of us and most consumers, all those things are solved. You can watch it direct to your TV, direct to your Roku box. So it's not true that from a quality perspective, that OTT is somehow subpar, especially when we're going to just look at literal absolute picture quality, video quality. Now, the caveat then to all this is that what are we used to and what have we gotten forever, unless cable was out with our broadcast and our pay TV package, that never buffered. It was always there, right? It didn't change resolution because internet bandwidth changed and it dropped from a 4K to a 1080p or 1080p to 480p, and I'm speaking of ABR switching. And so when we're dealing with a managed network versus a unmanaged network, the open internet, OTT, that is ultimately where these customer experience and these user experience issues happen. It's not because somehow broadcasters have better encoders or better tools, or they actually don't. In fact, in a lot of cases, they're really racing to update and to dump the boxes and dump all the black box encoders. Not that they have to get rid of all hardware in all applications. But I mean, the point is that a lot of times those closed systems they're getting rid of, and they're going to software, and they're moving. So it's interesting when you look at an experience and you say, that was a really good experience for OTT, or that was a bad experience. It's so complicated along the distribution chain that you really can't put your finger necessarily and say, oh, those people should have just, they should have used better, whatever.
Well, it's funny you do say that. Or just to pick on one thing that our industry is still struggling with, and you saw it with Mayweather, McGregor, and you saw it with Turner in the golf.
That's right.
Simple things like e-commerce paywalls, seemingly simple.
Yep.
And all of a sudden in your cable package, you're already in, you just press click
Authentication.
and we know.
Yep.
And then how many people are going to show up and concurrently subscribe to an OTT service?
That's right, and that's an excellent, thank you for bringing that up, because that's a point of failure. The consumer does not care why it failed.
They just want to
All
know
the consumer knows is, I tried to watch the video and it didn't work, or it took me
worse,
3
I paid
minutes,
for it,
or
now
I
it's
missed
free.
yeah, exactly, and that's, that's a real struggle. Now, I will make one comment, and then I'll let everybody else, chime in here. One of the things that we saw this with the World Cup coverage, and some of the bit rates that were being used were so high that it was not very watchable. It wasn't very streamable, and there were problems with HDR signaling, and certain TVs, the colors were wrong, and things like that. Those are sort of a little bit growing pains. A lot of this, I mean, how many massive productions like the World Cup are done And so, the next one will be better, but that is the complexity, and we're going to get through that, and the industry is working through it very, very proactively. So the experiences are going to get better quickly, very quickly on OTT.
I would like to kind of add a little bit to that, the type of content changes your expectation of the quality as well. If I'm sitting down for a movie, yes, 4K HDR, great. But little clips or things that my kids are looking through, they don't care if it buffers. They're like, well, I'll move on to the next one.
That's right.
So I guess in a way they do. But you also look at some of the quality of which the videos that they want to see. It's just kind of quick entertainment, very different experience than what we'd expect out of a buffered, Netflix movie. It's like, okay, Dad, go fix the internet.
Right, right. Well, to sort of build off that, Sean, you talk about these short snackable clips. What are some of the synergies that you're seeing now, and do you predict in the future for, more traditional linear experiences working alongside and with short snackable clips that are shared out on social media?
Well, it's an easy one to align sports, right? You want to see that live. You want to know what happened in the moment that it happened. But the things that get sent around are little social, shared. So the ability, I think, the most important thing would be for the viewer to be able to send that in that moment's notice. It's kind of like you don't want to really think about it. It's like, oh, that little clip, let me send that to my friends, without stopping your experience, without forcing you to step out of the screen. I think that's a big deal. I know that's what a lot of people are trying to do, and to me, I see the easier ways to do that. That's a win right there, and it's going to drive you back to the recording of that event. It doesn't have to be just sports. It's an easy one because everybody's watching that in a moment. It could be other experiences easily.
I think most of the broadcasters that I speak to, at least here in the US, are using their social media to drive people to their main channels at night. It's using the lean forward technologies to push to the lean back technologies. They're hoping that if you're watching their Facebook during the day, when you go home, you'll watch their channel at night. That still seems to be the lowest hanging fruit for how they can use social media.
It's consistent. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think snackable is the new megaphone. It's the new promo, right? It's the way to drive buzz, drive awareness. And I think some of the things that Sean's talking about that'll start taking place over the next few years is even just little tidbits that actually take you back to that program when you start looking at the convergence of not just connected TV and mobile, but connected TV, mobile, and the home, right? Look at what Comcast is doing with the new Xfinity rollout. You're talking a fully integrated house, right? And then taking that with you. So you're going to need those promos, those new forms of commercials on social. That's the new megaphone to get you back to that program and get through the noise.
Well, there's always only three things on television, right? There's the show, the promo to tell you to watch the show, and the ad or subscription to pay for it. And then is it news, sports, or entertainment? And then the tool sets you're seeing, if it's the conundrum of if the tree fell in the woods and no one was there to hear it. So on cable and on MSOs, I run a promo, no one heard it. So the only way to get to the audience is through social. We're watching all these tool sets come in, but it's not, it follows the traditional model because it has to drive the ad revenue, but it's also accretive. It's also part of a way of tracking. It's a way to know if something's trending. And you can take even a 10-pole film and slice and dice it on promos, and you make a live shot or even entertainment of any given music concert, then you're able to create instant clips that then viral themselves out through YouTube, through Facebook, on anything, and then drive that back to the actual show itself.
Yeah, sorry, just one quick thought. I can't say the name of them, but one big home entertainment company that we're working with is doing a lot with, sort of interactives, social clips, behind the scenes, and they're doing them all to be contextual and in the moment when you're watching the program, and so on another device, or as a way to be working with that content, offline, and then ultimately get you there when you do get home. So it's kind of, we're seeing that already just in the space. So.
What I've seen has been a big change is using one social media platform and now having to use multiple. What I mean by that, and again, I'll pick on my family, my dad watches everything on Facebook. If it didn't happen on Facebook, it didn't happen. My daughter hates Facebook. She likes Instagram. My son likes YouTube, and my mum just downloads the apps. The point being is if I want to see your ad, you've got to put it everywhere because I'm not going where you are. You've got to come where I am. And this is also a different kind of philosophy that I've seen change, where you're taking a single stream and now pushing it to all the platforms at the same time. So you're going where they are.
Right. Well, Rebecca, with all the work you're doing with local newsrooms, what are you seeing in terms of how those companies are using social media and the various platforms, both as an ends to itself and as a means to an end to drive them back to the main source?
I mean, some of the challenges around what everyone is talking about also lives with whoever the content owners are going to be the ones that want to do that slicing and dicing and clipping it up. They don't want to entrust whether it's the viewers or someone else to do that for them. And so it just creates complexity around how to do it. Similarly, with the newsrooms, they're held to a higher standard, just like the traditional MVPDs are held to a higher standard in terms of broadcast quality and following that line. And I think that live streaming and OTT got a little bit of a pass there because, right? Similar, not same, you have journalists that are held to a high level of journalistic standards, and they want to make sure that as they're reporting out what they're talking about, it actually tells the full story. It's in no way, there are a lot of complexities to all of this, both in the storytelling, from a technology perspective, again, and this is, in my view, probably from a more business perspective, right? The technology is there. We can create things, and we have created things that solve some of these problems, but the business challenges still exist. And so from a local news perspective, absolutely it makes sense to, whether it's taking clips and then using them in social, or what I talk a lot to my folks about is actually starting with that being the main platform, right? Having the story be the hub, and then having the different platforms be different ways that you tell it. Because you can't, we all know, you can't just, copy and paste what's on the website and put it over on TV and make it make sense, or vice versa. Every different platform has a different way to best optimize how you're using it.
Right. Well, and that's a nice springboard for, I think, the rest of the discussion, where I want to spend talking about business models and monetization. Getting back to what I said earlier about, it seems like we're still trying to solve some of the same problems we were trying to solve, or that we were promising to solve 20 years ago. I think back on, every conference, every panel you went to 20 years ago that talked about advertising said, well, you can't just take the ad from TV and show it online. Well, you're still seeing that happen today. 20 years ago, they were talking about the brave new world of digital e-commerce, where, and the example people always used was, you could be watching Friends, and if you wanted to buy Jennifer Aniston's sweater, you could buy Jennifer Aniston's sweater. We're getting there, but we're still not quite there. Where do you see, and Hank, I'm looking at you because this is, squarely in your wheelhouse. Where do you think we're at in terms of finally unlocking that monetization potential we've been trying to unlock for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. The Jennifer Aniston sweater is the funniest thing that we always get told, when I go into every meeting to talk about our technology. And my response is, how long ago was that? And they're like, oh, maybe I tried that 6 or 7 years ago. I go, what was the penetration of smartphones 6 or 7 years ago, right? And so every technology has an adoption curve. I remember in 2001, I was telling you guys backstage, I showed that scene from The Matrix to the guys that were predecessors of Verizon, called OnePoint, DSL, 1.5 megabits streaming, no buffer, and they looked at me and said, that's great, but why do I care when I get the DVD at Blockbuster, right? And it's like that mentality existed in that world, right? So now, fast forward, right, to where, Comcast is rolling out a connected TV, connected home solution. Now, fast forward to where 5G by 2029 or 2028, 90% of all 5G traffic is going to be video-based. 2021, 82% of the internet is going to be video-based. So suddenly you start seeing these frameworks evolve, right, where these things are possible, where you can just, we demoed at CES, with an Alexa integration, Alexa, ask Source what Andrew Lincoln is wearing right now, and she would come back and tell you, right? So it's not interrupting that experience. It's not that, that traditional advertising mentality where you're trying to club them over the head to say, look at this, right, and buy this. It's actually more of a discoverable model where you as a consumer can lean back and decide when do you lean forward and have that impact. And I think that's where OTT starts to take a lead in the future, because it's a medium that is perfect for that kind of format.
Well, and the ad does become more of the show.
Right.
And it's not necessarily this intrusive in now, a word from our sponsor.
Right.
And we're actually kind of going back to the 50s and the soap opera, and I'm watching major sponsors, like you take General Motors, which will spend $250 million on a given brand's ad spend. You carve out 10, you can build a show around that, and for the first time, actually see what happens from your programming and content and storytelling to the actual customer reaction, which in traditional broadcast is completely separated. No one knows anything on that front.
That's why we needed Nielsen, right? If we can get around that, if we can find some uniform metrics to give us that measurement right away.
Isn't video today also the largest user of traffic on the internet? I thought it was today.
Like I said, by 2021, I think it'll be 82%, but it's still the largest.
Cisco's visual index.
Yeah, I think it was either porn and then Twitch, or Twitch and then porn. I don't know which was the one and two. I've tried both, and
Well, and I was going to add too. I think the democratization that occurred in music is playing out right now in front of us here in video, right? And so the quality you're getting from different forms of content is really interesting. And when you start tracking that, with brand and product integration now, and the brands that are actually producing content and becoming part of that game, I think, the last stat I looked at is this 2019 is projected to be the first year where, brand integration without even a true attribution tracking measurement, right, will start to take over the monies being spent on the 30-second, 15-second spot, right? And so that's a big move without even having metrics to even measure that. Right?
But at the same time, we're still seeing, I think most consumers, when they think about OTT services, they think subscription. But now we're also beginning to see services like Pluto TV and Xumo, where it's an ad-supported linear. It's using the old model. Do you think there's still a future in that?
Free.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The
Why
challenge.
wouldn't it be, right?
Yeah. The challenge though is that the CPMs that are valued by the market for these ad-supported services are orders of magnitude lower than what a broadcaster can get. And we can argue that that shouldn't be the case. And, we can have all kinds of Nielsen discussions about, whether there's artificial sort of propping up, and I'm sure Rebecca can give a lot of insights. That's not the purpose of this panel, but we probably could have a very nice discussion if we wanted to go in that direction. But that's the reality. And so one of the challenges with the AVOD services, the reason why you go to Crackle and you go to Pluto TV and the quality is good. It's not that it's bad, but it's definitely maybe just a little step below than, say, a Netflix. The content is absolutely, 10 years old or older. I mean, it still can be, major Hollywood movies, but the point is that, it's not all the fresh stuff, right? And it's not because these services don't want to transmit better quality. It's not that they can't. It's not that they don't want more content. The economics don't support it.
Yeah,
and that's the reality. Now, to put a point on this today, that's true. Now, to put a point on this, though, is that the good news is, and the reason why Pluto could be acquired by Viacom for $340 million, fabulous exit for them anyway, is that there's still a lot of people are happy with, they don't mind watching a rerun from a movie that they saw 15 years ago. And there's a lot of applications, and there's different economic, not everybody can afford 3 or 4 subscriptions, you know, so.
How easy would it be for a broadcaster to stick a live stream into that, and now you really have the replacement for ATSC 3.0 if that doesn't happen, right?
Well, so it's interesting, like Comcast, new Xfinity, the $5 box, like you think about where that is ultimately going. It's not about them putting, first of all, it's a way to get a very low cost box receiver into US households. It's, you know, and again, I'll use it just because it works. It is an ultimate Trojan horse. You talk about a $5 box and a great experience. The X1 is amazing. I think it's very, very interesting. Now, what they end up doing with that.
Especially because Comcast owns a lot of content, good quality content, so it's all coming together.
Exactly. So, yes, I mean, your comment is.
Well, and I think when you, going back to your earlier point about CPMs and just the sort of, you know, traditional paradigm that was there for linear television and that CPM still being held up, you know, who knows how long that will last. It might last forever, but maybe with ATSC 3.0, that veil will come down because people will truly start to understand what the consumer gets from that. But I think that, you know, OTT does have challenges to get into advertising as the model, because the subscription model is that guarantee. I mean, we all know what plays out with the people trying to access information about their program on Netflix, right? You can see that and they're not going to give that information up because they need to keep that subscription lane steady. And I think that you know, you really have to rethink advertising in OTT. It's got to be rethought because it's so transparent, and you will know what the consumer is doing. And I think that going back to the Jennifer Aniston sweater, of course, that's a true attribution cycle. I literally got you to buy something on the moment. But you'd be surprised to learn that, you know, you can track attribution. Like when we've found out from content owners, location data that spins up somebody to go there is a 2.5-year cycle. Now, they're not looking to get a VIG on every time someone books a vacation to that, but that helps them negotiate better credits at that local government level, their cost of production. Maybe they want to reshoot there in the future because they had a good result from that. So there's all kinds of ways to think about monetization in terms of, you know, when you can get that consumer to really truly connect to that information that's there in and around that OTT environment.
Also, how many of the people here are US-centric? You know, I'm not sure how many people here are US-based and how many are worldwide. And I wonder how this different, you know, it's different in other countries. You know, being an American as I am, I don't really have much idea.
Right. Looking at the future of OTT, you know, I kind of want to close with this. I'd like each of you to, you know, gaze into your crystal ball a little bit and share with the audience what you see as the most exciting new technology or new business model that's either happening now or going to happen soon that you think is really going to change how we think about this entire industry. Any volunteers to go first? Otherwise, I'll just go on down the line.
I'll go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Take the pressure off. So 5G. I mean, and I pause and sort of laugh because, you know, I think we're all probably, but having ubiquitous access to the network at the speed and the reliability, and it's much more even than 5G is not just about, oh yeah, it's a faster standard and the devices are going to be, there are some super exciting capabilities with edge computing that open up all kinds of opportunities for cloud gaming and for just lots of new entertainment experiences, which, you know, we stayed very, very video-centric, and that's appropriate for where we are. But there's just a lot of really, really exciting things that 5G is going to open up. So 5G and then HEVC as a codec are going to really enable, for example, 4K on, you know, HDR on a mobile device. And I'll end with this. If any of you are hearing that and you're saying that's crazy on a 6.5 screen, you can't see the resolution, you're absolutely right. You cannot see the you cannot see the resolution, but the quality is so demonstrably better. The experience that when you show someone that and you show them what we're sending today, which if you're lucky is a 1080p profile, the consumer knows which is better. And it's not like by a little bit, it's by a lot. So hearing 4K on a mobile device, yes, that's going to be a high-end experience. Yes, that's going to be in a very developed market. Yes, that's going to be to a certain demographic, a consumer who can afford the expensive device. They can play that back. But it's something that people will want. It's super exciting and is great for us as video producers.
Yeah, I'll jump in and go because I want to hand something off to Hank. You know what's coming. But as a content creator, to me, the most exciting thing is the amount of content we have to do and the level of production that is expected. I love it. There's going to be a lot of work out there. But the exciting technological piece is, to me, the e-commerce connection to anything that we create. And that's where I'll hand off to Hank, because that was a very impressive component that I saw that Source Digital was doing, and the ease of use and the layer that we would add on to any piece that we make. There's not much effort there, and it's just like another component, almost like subtitling, something like that. A lot easier, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of rethinking the e-commerce. To take a more macro view, Forrester predicts that the future of payments is actually going to be defined by a high-value commerce experience. So you as a consumer, as you move through your world, I'll give you a restaurant analogy. Why do you have to sign a check and do a tip and all of that when you could just walk in and order from the menu and walk right out, right? And so there's lots of things coming down the pike. And when I think of content, we've done a lot of studies just, on our basic thesis before we launched Source Digital. And it was really that we didn't have to invent this market. People have a natural connection and do things to content. Just like Facebook didn't invent friendships, right? They provided a framework that literally built a bridge and then tracked it. And so when you think about, the content experience lane and how it influences your spend and your trends and the things you do, you can really start rethinking the entire format and how quickly you want to get a person to a spend cycle. How do you want to create maybe wish listing because they don't want to interrupt the dream that they're in right there, but maybe they do want to take advantage. Maybe create more shareable elements within, hey Dad, remember this Harley you had, that kind of stuff, right? And you can now start following those breadcrumbs around, and that's where I think true monetization begins in this next wave. The other thing I'm really personally excited about, I don't know how many of you in the audience, and I encourage you to look this term up, is progressive web apps. Right now we're very focused on, with OTT and being in the app marketplace, right? And I think that, and everybody knows this coming, is the quality of experience you're now getting with what's called PWAs, which are really embedded web pages that, the app is just a trained behavior to go to, but you can get exactly that same thing on a www dot, right? And so we're doing some stuff that's really cool with just tying commerce right into those web lanes and then using that data to drive search so you can get you right to the thing you're looking for in those moments. And then that's where you start really shifting things around. So I think progressive web apps are going to radically change. And I bring it up because obviously everybody here is in editing or in production or in some facet. But when you start thinking of storytelling, I think the one theme that happened across this panel is that you can't just think about that singular piece, and even Avid as a manufacturer or anybody who's making tools has to think about multi-lane telling of stories all the way through to the application framework. Like, what does the user experience look like? Not just what's in the content.
And that's my segue from that, which is well played up. We've covered it all, and the tools of storytelling changed, the connection through, web interface, et cetera. 5G is going to be very big in terms of ubiquitous ability to acquire content in ways you couldn't, ways to push it out to the edge. But in all of this, we've left off two letters, and I'm surprised because usually hit all the buzzwords, but artificial intelligence is going to radically impact all of this, and we are embracing it. But if you're going to have an artificially intelligently curated edge that is going to optimize monetization, implicitly you're going to have a highly intelligent and artificially intelligent machine learned infrastructure that supports that. And you're going to use that in everything from how I tell stories to how they're consumed, and be able to quantitatively prove that that quality of experience happened in a way that a few years from now, this will be an interesting recap on this panel, because this is happening now. This is not, in the past, we were able to say, you know, this will be 10 years and kind of understand it. And just looking at like autonomous vehicles, 2 years ago, CES, all the majors announced that they would be in production in 5 years. And you kind of don't believe it, but we know that's happening. And we're watching a compression of technology that we've never seen, where 50 years of technology will be rolled out in 10, and we're going to undo an 80-year-old business model. So it'll be interesting.
I'll jump in. I would say that what we're seeing, and you know, I mentioned, you know, what would Facebook do if they launched a TV channel? Well, they'll definitely do it in the cloud. So a lot of our services are moving into the cloud. You know, we make devices on the edge that push video into the cloud, but we're starting to add graphic engines, switcher engines, playout engines, all in the cloud, so that we, you know, you won't have to buy hardware. It'll just be, you know, a SaaS model, as everything is moving towards that SaaS model. So yeah, if you're doing a game and you want to do a multi-camera shoot, you won't have to turn up with a crew. You're just a couple of encoders on a couple of cameras connected to 5G, which, you know, if we believe what we're told, will give us unbelievable bit rates. You know, we'll send HEVC up to the cloud and then transcode it to multiple bit rates for whoever needs what. But we will add the graphics. We'll add, you know, we'll do everything that we would do as if we were doing a production at the location.
So I'm the beneficiary of all these
The
wonderful
best to
answers.
last.
So I agree with everyone. I truly do. 5G, AI, that's absolutely the case. I will also offer that you could have the most elegant end-to-end technological solution, but if you don't have good quality content, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And vice versa. If you have the best quality content out there and you don't have an elegant way to deliver it, it's not going to work. And so I would say that whichever company or companies that can figure out how to integrate both these elegant technological solutions with getting the right content and delivering it in the right way, they're going to end up being the winners.
All right, well, as you said, I think it was John, it would be interesting to see a year from now, if we're back here, how much of what we're talking about now is already in place, because like you said, Eric, the speed at which things are happening now is unlike anything we've ever seen. So I think that's a great place to end here. I'd like to thank all my panelists so much for your insights, and thank you.